A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Video Games That Are Totally Awesome. So, it's about time we talk about Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Some might think of it as the scariest of the bunch, the best of the bunch, and on top of all that, the concept of this game is quite different than the others. It does not follow a security guard in the place that we've come to know as Freddy Fazbear's, or basically any other known location of Freddy Fazbear's entertainment. It instead follows a young boy, whom we come to know as Evan Afton. Yep, the son of William Afton. There actually were multiple children that William had over the years. There was a daughter of his known as Elizabeth, and apart from Evan Afton, there was also an older son of his known as Michael Afton. But either way you look at it, though, the way that Evan Afton is portrayed as here, he's a rather depressed boy whom seeks the comfort of his Fazbear pals. It is often speculated, even to this day, if this was the true origin that led up to the creation of the animatronic characters. But to tell you the truth, the way that the timeline gives these sort of things to us, it's a bit unclear exactly what truly led to the fabrication of the Freddy Fazbear's animatronics. But here's the thing though. One character in the fourth game that we come to know as, known as Fredbear, is supposedly the works that led up to the creation of Freddy Fazbear himself and many other animatronic friends of Freddy Fazbear Entertainment itself. But hey, you know what? We might as well discuss the plot here and a few other tidbits of information regarding the fourth game and other things that I might as well talk about before the end of the day here. So, here we go. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 begins with a somewhat pixelated set of things that go around. You have Evan Afton walking around the room with some dialogue going in a few days since a party is expected to take place. Evan feels trapped in his room, even crying on the floor. But with the plush characters around in the room, bringing him comfort, bringing him pretty much his only bits of joy, as in the house, a lot happens. But one thing that goes on at night that he constantly experiences are nightmares. See, that's the main gist of this game in comparison to the others. The first and second game involved defending yourself in the security office of Freddy Fazbear's location against animatronic characters. The third game involved phantoms, mostly coming out of, failing systems in a Fazbear's Frights-themed attraction, while the fourth game centers around a character whom is related to William Afton himself, whom we come to know as Springtrap, as his alter ego. And on top of all that, Evan is experiencing nightmares, the likes of which had apparently become the origin story for the eventual creation of the animatronics. But a lot of this stuff is just pure speculation. Whether it's true that Evan's nightmares with Fredbear and all the other things went around, and that's what ultimately led to Freddy Fazbear and the other characters being manifested by William and company, it's pretty much up for debate. And there, of course, are many other things going around the storyline of FNAF 4 in which that a ton of other subjects are brought up. One common thing about Freddy Fazbear's and the Five Nights at Freddy's universe itself that I might as well talk about real quick is that there are mini-games. Yep, mini-games. These seemingly are commonplace in all of the FNAF games. Parts 2 and 3 especially were known for having some mini-games, mainly giving out that classic pixelated style to it. In contrast to the more modernized 3D look that we've seen in all the games leading up until this point with Part 4. Part 4 itself does have a good share of different mini-games as well. But we can't forget about the cutscenes, which are basically just little bits of the overhead view of a pixelated Evan Afton wandering around his house. At first, with the first night, it's just him in his room as he goes up to the door and starts crying on the floor as he prepares for a night of horror with the Nightmare animatronics. You have Nightmare Freddy, Nightmare Chica, Nightmare Foxy, Nightmare Bonnie. Much like with the first game though, we at first get more of Chica and Bonnie, while we eventually are led into anticipations of Foxy and Freddy. But as we saw with the other games, they've been adding more characters, and they've also been adding a lot more obstacles to be wary of and other things to be on the lookout for. The gameplay here, of course, does allow for Evan Afton to move almost freely, but at first he's in his room in front of his bed. You can look behind you by simply going down, whether it's with the mouse or with the controller, as console versions of the original FNAF games did eventually come around after a few years. But there are specific control functions that we'd have to put together. But it's usually going down, whether with the D-pad or whatnot, that allows for us to look behind. You also have the ability to turn on your flashlight and off your flashlight, and also move to the left or right on both doors to the bedroom, as well as to the closet. The closet, of course, does play a key role in the storyline later on that unfolds with the game's own plot. Because, like I said, with Freddy and Foxy not being as apparent as Bonnie and Chica in the earlier nights, as the nights progress and seemingly become more difficult, the main thing you want to look out for are the animatronics. And of course, part of the nightmare is that they are all trying to get Evan before the party is set to take place. And what exactly is this party about? Well, it's not really well explained what goes on, but it's supposedly Evan's next thing that he intends to do after this horror is all over and done with his life. I guess you could say it's him becoming braver and braver as he grows older and seemingly starts to become a teenager after some time. But he has a few years before that even happens. In terms of where FNAF 4 goes on the timeline, it supposedly does take place at around the same time that the first FNAF game takes place. And, well, it's possible that could be true and all that. But with all the story going around that Evan's nightmares and Fredbear were responsible for the origin of the animatronics, it's rather conflicting to find out what is actually true about it. But with the game plan that goes around, waltzing up to the doors, the closet, and eventually looking backwards to see for any other things that could be wrong, since after all, those 4 animatronics that I previously listed, plus Fredbear, as well as the Nightmare variation of Freddy simply called Nightmare, well, with all these characters to worry about, there still are some others. There, of course, is a Halloween Chica known as Jacko Chica, and, well, that itself is a bit more on the unexplainable side of things. But we could just say that some of the other Nightmare animatronics that come around, mainly as originals for the spin-off known as Ultimate Custom Night. But there is, of course, one other thing we might as well mention. Freddles. Yeah, little Freddies that just wander around the room, usually behind you, which will explain why you need to occasionally look behind you with your flashlight. And you'll see them on the bed, typically, and then move quickly as soon as they're spotted. The same thing, obviously, will happen with most of the other animatronics. The main thing is to keep a good ear out for certain things, because if you're wanting to prevent the animatronics from entering the room via the doors, then of course you got to get up there, flash your flashlight at them, and occasionally look out the door further to make sure that they're far away from you. Check both sides often, because there's always a good chance that one of them could come close enough so that when you go to one door, boom, you get jump scared. And unlike with the third game, these Nightmare animatronics will kill you. Which is kind of weird though. If it's a nightmare, wouldn't it actually not kill you? On top of that, Evan Afton is a boy, and so nightmares seemingly are the commonplace in his life. I guess you could say it's probably the sort of liberty that they took upon with Freddy Krueger, and it's probably true, because Freddy Krueger, Freddy Fazbear, both franchises having nightmares, there's probably a million connections that I could put together between both these franchises, and with seemingly the same sort of narrative that we've gotten from the likes of both Wes Craven and Scott Cawthon, they seemingly follow a child in both cases. Although most of the time in Nightmare on Elm Street, you have Freddy Krueger terrorizing teenagers. Yeah. But with the Nightmare animatronics, they're all going after a young child whom is about 8 years old. Though it's not ultimately that clear on how old he is either. But let's be real though. Regardless of the connections that we could make between different franchises, regardless of the speculations on where this fits in the timeline and also where does Evan Afton's life fit in and when it comes to how we correlate to things today and with a lot of other things going on, it's probably no wonder why this one's a bit hard for me to review in comparison to the others. But still, the idea of there being nightmares involved was ingenious. It's no wonder why Part 4 got a lot better reception than even some of the other games. With Parts 1 and 2 seemingly getting some of the best success out of a bunch of them, 3 did hold up well, but not that well compared to the others. Safe that Part 3, in most franchises, was not at all as good as the other two. But Part 4 seemingly blows it out of the water in most cases. Sometimes it even surpasses the likes of the previous films. Although, it's quite rare for a Part 4 to actually do better than even the first film. Toy Story 4 seemingly did a way better job by critics in the box office compared to the first film. But the first film was truly a marvel of its time, and the ultimate pioneer that led into CG-related films for many years to come. And even today, with the upcoming Pixar's Elio, it's seemingly the case that Toy Story's success and popularity over the years truly did lead to a CGI-infested series of films that probably will never go away because of how cheap they are to make and how simple they are to put together in comparison to all the live-action stuff with all of that practical effects and all that stuff. It involved a lot of people getting injured or even killed. But with today, you got so little people that end up controversially going through things or getting hurt or whatnot. All because CG is where it's at today. So why do you guys hate CG films? Or CG in general? Life is simpler now. It just ticks me off to the point where I want to do something really horrible where people just do not make sense on this and start hating CG when it hasn't even killed anybody yet. Or maybe I'm just pushing it at this point. Well, anyways, with Part 4 of Five Nights at Freddy's, it certainly did so well that it almost surpassed the likes of the other games by a mile, because the usage of the nightmare cliche in this instance truly worked out so well. Even though the nightmare cliche in horror history has been done many times, the way that Part 4 of FNAF had done it, it felt refreshing to most people. And also, it seemingly gave us a new perspective on how the FNAF universe and the lore put into it could probably shape the continuities that would follow suit within a few years. After all, the following year would come around until the sister location would come around. And much like the other games, it introduced a lot of new characters, but also gave us a slightly different narrative than the others put together, as well as gameplay mechanics and other stuff. But for Part 4, it sure did put a lot of us on edge, because this was a nightmare that we would not wake from. Death couldn't save us. Yeah. It's probably less said better. Just go play the game for yourself. If you can get a hold of it on PC or even on consoles like I did, well, you can definitely get a good share of the take. And also a true understanding of poor Evan Afton and his not so great life in his own home. For my final scoring of FNAF Part 4, we'll chalk it up to a nice big 8.3 out of 10.1. So with all 4 of the original FNAF games coming around, we sure have a good tally up here. Part 3 unfortunately had not quite hit as many marks as the other 3 games did, but with Part 4, I feel like that we rounded up to a great place here. It almost is a lot like how Psycho was put together. The first film was no doubt a well-known classic. The second one was unexpectedly awesome. The third one, unfortunately, didn't hit as many notes, but with Part 4, they were able to execute a lot in order to give us a true origin story of Norman Bates himself. And the fact that Anthony Perkins stuck around for even all 3 of the sequels, from 1983 to 1990, it truly was something to behold for the time. The 3 sequels that followed Psycho's massive success truly was a unique trilogy in and of itself. It not only rebooted the franchise and colorized it for the first time, But all three of these sequels, much like the FNAF sequels, had their own distinct feel and also a unique, fresh new take on the franchise itself. But with the FNAF games, they have a similar sort of thing going on. The first one, no doubt, shaped the history of horror games forever. And to this day, there aren't that many examples of horror games you could find that actually do even better than what FNAF has done. But when Silent Hill 2 came out, it truly blew us all the way out of the water in horror games like you would have never seen before. Even Resident Evil Village did quite an outstanding job, especially that one scene with the live fetus. Wow. That was horrifying. Either way you look at it though, FNAF truly was gonna stick around. And boy, with the upcoming Secret of the Mimic coming out in a few weeks, it's no doubt that we're truly gonna have a new big event in FNAF history. Hey, you know what? Maybe I'll join in on the craze as soon as it comes out. The first time since the Security Breach continuity began a few years ago. And I'm more than glad that I've contributed a lot to the franchise in the last few years alone. So, Scott Cawthon has recognized me pretty well for what I've done, and I hope that I stick around with it as much as I can. Anyways though, on Friday, tomorrow, I will be talking about Sister Location, and hopefully we'll round out this whole week with a lot of FNAF in mind, and maybe as a bonus, I'll include Ultimate Custom Night. But we'll just have to see how all this goes down first.